Welcome, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for this Q&A panel. What we want to do is wrap up a discussion that we had in the Connect Early Career channel for the last 3 weeks on freelancing careers in DVS. And we've invited 4 people who are experienced DVS freelancers who are hopefully going to answer a lot of the questions that we all have. And yeah, I'm Sarah. I'm one of the General Directors Early Career of DVS, and my co-moderator is Marilia, who helped moderate the discussion in the channel in the last weeks as well. And to start, I think it would be nice if all 4 of you could just really briefly introduce yourselves and sort of maybe just sort of say quickly what kind of work you're doing and how long you've been doing it for. Carla, do you want to start and then just pass on?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Carla Chanuska. I have my own design consultancy, independent, in Minneapolis, Minnesota, in the U.S. And I focus on data viz primarily in the marketing space for larger corporate clients, and I've been doing it for about 7 years. I sort of do a mix of UX and marketing, data viz and UX, data viz and marketing, and go from there. So grateful to be here this morning. Thanks for asking. And I'll just pass it on to whoever wants to go next.
I could go. I'm Tyler Wolf. I was freelance for about 3 years. I also have done a mix of UX and data viz, and also a little front end development. I very recently started working a normal job, a full-time job, but I still do a little bit of freelance on the side. And more recently, I've gotten into a little bit of creative side, a little more like generative art, data art, etc. And that's me.
I can go next. So I have a consulting agency, Pixels and Plans. It's been about, I think, 4 or 5 years now. We mainly do work with government and NGO clients in Canada. So it's a little bit of an interesting landscape to navigate, given the stringent requirements that most of our clients have in terms of their audiences and needs. The team is myself, and then 2 years ago, I was able to pull my partner and husband out of his job, and now he consults full-time with me. He's a data viz engineer. I'm an information designer and data scientist. So together we kind of work on these projects. We used to also have database art practice for about a decade together. So there's some blending there. But yeah, happy to be here. And Shirley, last but not least, I'm handing it off to you.
Thank you, Julia. Hi, good morning. Thank you for having me on this panel. My name is Shirley. I've been freelancing full-time for 4 years now. So I quit my full-time job in May 2015 or 2016. Okay, yes, 4 years. And I do the full spectrum of creating data visualization on the web. So my background is as a software engineer. So I mainly what I'm the best at is creating data viz with D3 and all of the other kind of web libraries. But I work with clients on their data set, and I help them do the data analysis and the design and the code as well. And mainly, I think I've worked with kind of tech and journalism companies.
Well, thank you, everyone. We would like to ask you first. You already started saying that, but can you tell us very briefly, how did you start freelancing? Maybe we can go the opposite, so you can start replying, Shirley, and then we go back again.
Yeah, thank you. So the way that I got started freelancing was very abruptly. There were some things that were going on at my old company, and essentially I decided that I wanted to try. I basically realized that I wanted to spend my time working on things that I found. So my old company was in the enterprise security space, and while I really much very enjoyed doing data visualization for them, I realized I didn't like the security part. So I decided that I wanted to try out freelancing to see if there was a different industry that I very much enjoyed, and that way, like, I can spend maybe a few years doing it, and then after a few years, I could maybe having figured out that industry, go back full time somewhere in that industry. It's been 4 years, and what I learned is that I just like freelancing and the freedom and independence that freelancing gives me, even though it's sometimes stressful. But yeah, so essentially, I decided it in about a few weeks and then quit my job. Thankfully, had some amount of savings and went freelance.
I guess if we're going backwards, it would be me next. Yeah, it kind of, I guess, I think freelancing more found me than I think I sought out to seek it. I was in the public health space as a researcher, actually doing research on water quality. So I was a geospatial analyst, so doing a lot of that kind of work, and publishing academic literature, and so I'm doing data viz for that space. But alongside that, I've had an exhibiting art practice and a design practice, and so I kind of had to just say to myself, it's time to like have one CV and be one person. And data viz was such a great niche to be able to both be scientific and analytical, but also highly visual, and where design mattered, because it didn't in academic posters. So it was, it was kind of interesting. So I left my government job to start a nonprofit and started a tech company. And then it was during having a tech company in an accelerator space that I found myself kind of doing some of this work for fellow colleagues at companies, because they would say, oh, you're really good at explaining things. Can you work on our pitch deck? Can you analyze some of this stuff? And so I just found myself in this kind of like comms data viz role for people around me, and I was ignoring my own company that I was trying to build. And so I realized that was kind of a calling. And then I had a client that gave Owen and I like a very data art heavy project, and she suggested that I start a freelance kind of business to house that. So that was the first step of me saying, okay, maybe I'll dissolve my tech company and move over to this kind of freelance space. And so that's what ended up happening. So I think it just kind of came knocking on my door, and I decided, okay, yes, I will go for it, and I will do that. I think it was Tyler next, right?
Yes. Okay. I'll try to make this short. So I worked at a fintech startup. They had a lot of data viz on their platform. And they had this open source library I was working on called NBD3, which back in those days was really popular and exciting. So I learned a lot of data viz programming, but also the design side. But I didn't really like the job so much. So I changed jobs and worked as a UX designer. And then I didn't really like that job either. So then I went to a Bitcoin startup, and I worked as kind of a mix of a designer developer, and I didn't really like that job that much either. So I remember I was on vacation with my then girlfriend, and I was just like, I can't go back to an office anymore. It's just not the life I want to have. But I really loved the data viz thing throughout that whole time, and I was always trying to incorporate it into my work. So I thought, I'm just gonna, when I get the chance, I'm gonna go freelance, and I'm gonna focus on UX and data viz, because that's what I like. So I was very dramatic about it. So my girlfriend and I got married, so she's now my wife. We went traveling for 5 months, just didn't really have a destination in mind. We were living in New York. We decided to move to Sweden. And along the way, I was like, all right, I'm not getting a job when we land. I'm just going to freelance it and figure it out. So, but I guess to sum it all up, I wanted to kind of escape from all the things I didn't like about having a full-time job. And I really enjoyed it. So that was it.
Hi, I'm Carla, and thanks everybody. That's so interesting to hear how people get to data viz. My story is similar but different in that I was the creative director at an agency, kind of full service agency, leading teams of UX and design and brand for a wide variety of clients. And I was just I'd been doing it for a really long time, and I really wanted to do something different. And ironically, the power of email marketing, who knew? I got a cold email about a festival in town called the IO Festival, which I had no idea what it was. It was brand new, first time ever. And I thought, oh, I don't know any of these people. I don't know any of this work. This sounds fun. I'm just going to go. And it was a total whim. And I was so blown away by what people were doing. And I didn't know anything about processing. I didn't know any of the people. It blew my mind. And I want to say it was just love at first sight. And I thought, I have to do this. I have to change everything. And so I took, it's funny, I immersed myself into learning everything I could. I tried to get the agency I worked at to incorporate some more visualization practices into our work. No, that wasn't going to happen. And so I thought, that's it. So I left to start my own data viz business. I originally thought it was going to be a little mini agency like what I had left. But, somebody said to me, why would you want employees again? Why would you want to do that all over again? And so I haven't. I have maintained a lot of great relationships with other independent people. And so for 7 years, that's all I've been doing. I've been independent in a wide variety of ways, working for clients, doing data viz. And I just will say I started my business in 2013. So I did get to ride the infographic wave where everybody wanted a long, skinny infographic to put on everything. And so that's how I just happened to hook that right when I started Smart Hive, and I've been going ever since. So that's how I got started.
Thanks so much. Those are like interesting stories, but I also find it sort of interesting that everyone's story has quitting a job in it at some point. And I think a lot of people in the early career channel are very much still figuring out what they want to do and don't have a lot of work experience and are maybe still students. So we wanted to ask how important you think it is to have work experience, or even specifically data viz work experience, before trying to start a data viz career. Do you think it's possible? Do you think it's not possible at all? I think any of you who feel like they want to say something about that, just sort of.
I'll jump in.
I heard Carla, were you starting before?
Okay, I'll go and then you, Tyler. I don't think anything is impossible. I think there are so many different ways that people start working independently. I don't personally like the term freelance here in the US. I think it connotates that you're not serious about the work, or it's a side project or things like that. So I tend not to use that word for myself. But I do think when you're an emerging designer and you're just getting into the space, all work experience is valuable. How to work with clients, how to deal with revisions, how to communicate better. And so I often suggest getting even a part-time temporary job just to get into the space, because you will always have opportunity to incorporate and talk about data viz. And I always introduce myself as a designer who leads with data visualization and information design and storytelling with data and all the different ways we talk about what we do. And I think you get so much, you're basically paying someone to learn how to work with clients. I mean, someone's paying you to learn how to work with clients. And so I find that to be just like so valuable. It's just easier. Tyler?
Yes. I agree with everything you just said. It's interesting here in Sweden. You can either be what's basically a sole proprietor, or you have, in America, we call it an LLC. We call it an AB here, whatever. And people, when they meet you, they'll ask you, are you a sole proprietor or are you an LLC? And if you say sole proprietor, things like get a little like, okay, we can, maybe we can work with this. So yeah, that's definitely a thing. So I used to tell clients I was a consultant and tell my peers I was a freelancer. But yeah, with the work experience, I think it can be done without it. I highly recommend it. Even if it's to find out you don't like it, that's definitely a worthwhile experience. Also, you learn the processes. Like this stuff, it all seems so easy, right? When you like see it and you try it yourself, you're like, I made a cool graphic. But like when you actually do the job, the expectations and the way people react to it, it's good to have that experience and know how to like structure it so that you can work things in a way that works for everyone, rather than just saying like, wait, what? I thought it was good. So yeah, I highly recommend it. The other thing, because I'm working now full-time again, I gotta say, it gave me a very new perspective to working full-time after having worked freelance for a few years. Just the way you kind of see people within an organization, how you interact with them. To me, it was a huge plus. I'll stop there.
I don't know. I guess there's a raised hand I could use, but maybe I'll just unmute myself and jump in. I want to talk about this idea of work experience from the perspective of selling your services to clients, and just kind of address a couple points on that, because I agree with what both Tyler and Carla had said in terms of personal growth. I think it's really, really important to have a portfolio of work so your clients understand what your offering is. Whether you have developed that yourself or, I always say if you're going to volunteer time, find an NGO that's small enough that you can work with and offer your services, even if it's your first job. They usually have data viz needs. And so that does a number of things. Number one is it allows you to have a meaningful actual relationship with a client as opposed to just doing a self-directed project. And then they could potentially write you into their funding models if you do a good job. So you can develop that or pass you on. If they may not need your services anymore and you do a good job, they might pass you on to others. And plus you get the benefit of working for something that you love. So finding things that align with your own values would be really great too. So that's if you're just starting out to build a portfolio. I recommend a mix. I think that the network of clients, though, is also key as part of this, as opposed to necessarily having work experience in this field. I think you can come from a different field with work experience. And then I think you can start freelancing as long as your clients understand what your offering is, kind of what your niche is within this niche. The more specific you can be with your offering, I think the easier it is for people to understand if it's a good fit. And that's beneficial to both you and the client, because if it's not a good fit for you either, it's such a, yes, you get income, but at the same time, it may not be like something you're even proud of or a fruitful kind of relationship, right, in the product that you develop and build. So, cold kind of messaging and approaching clients is great. I do think, like for me, I thought about where my clients are. And I started going to conferences, not ones where fellow practitioners are, but where my clients actually are. Because to me, that's more valuable in connecting with clients. Not that I don't love my fellow data viz people. I think they're incredible. I'm glad we have a Slack and these opportunities. But in terms of, trying to get clients into my business, for me, it was, well, here I am. Here are my offerings. So I looked at where federal government, NGOs, where they all kind of meet and offered kind of a taste of what we do, and that allowed them to connect on a meaningful level. So yeah, portfolio, networking, and I think those can go a long way in terms of starting your services up.
Thank you very much. You actually already replied to to one of our next questions, because we have already a couple of questions from the audience, and one of those.
Did Shirley want to answer this?
Thank you.
Because so maybe you can ask, because I was going to, since you are already talking a little bit about the portfolio and how do you get clients, one of the questions was exactly that. Where do you start? Where do you find clients? And also, if you want to share, how did you get your first client, to be a bit more specific, and how did that go? Go for it.
Oh, sorry. So, I was going to answer the previous question a little bit.
Sure.
Yes. So I actually really enjoy hearing what everybody else is saying, because I feel like I learn a lot from this. I think I agree, but I think I might be a little bit stricter in the answer of work experience or not for freelancing than maybe everybody else on the panel. Of maybe it's just very much the style in which I like to interact with my clients, and that to me it's really important that because they're paying me and because I asked for a rate that is quite generous. I like to make sure that I have like a lot. I try to have a lot that I can offer, in the sense that I try to make sure that I have a really strong coding background. I try to like self-study the design, etc. And so I guess what I mean by that is personally, I think work experience is extremely, extremely important. So I think in terms of if you do want to start out as a student, I think what everybody else has alluded to is that the two most important things are your portfolio, because data visualization is such a visual field. The portfolio and also clients and working with clients, your relationship with clients, managing clients, networking with clients. And I think those things are kind of, I think portfolio is something you can work on as a student, but I think portfolio is something that's a little bit harder. Or I'm sorry, I should say that I think there's a difference, like Tyler said, to working on something for yourself and working on something with a not just a client, but somebody that is your somebody that's like kind of relying on you to produce something for them. And so I think that's a very, very different experience. And I think it's really valuable to be able to have that for a few years working at a company, to like be creating data visualizations for your clients within a company and have that experience. And also, I think it's really valuable to be able to, use a full-time job and a company to be able to have the experience of figuring out how to work with others and working with managers, working with clients, etc. And I think, so that's why for me, I actually think it's very important to have at least a few years of work experience instead of going into it just like right out of school. But that's just a very strong opinion from someone that does a very specific kind of freelancing. And so the follow-up question was, how did I get my first client? Was that the follow-up question?
Yes, well, since Julia was already talking about clients and portfolio, one of the questions is exactly that from the audience. Where does one start? And especially where does one start to find clients, which Julia already mentioned a bit about the conferences. So if you want to expand a bit on that.
Yeah, I actually really love what Julia was saying about conferences. I think it's extremely like creative. I personally think it's really extremely creative. I've never really thought to do that. And I think one of the things that Julia reminded me of is because I only ever worked at two different very small startup, like very small companies, I wasn't able to establish kind of the network of, because I think there's two different kinds of ways that you can get clients. The first kind is if you just worked in a lot of different companies or worked with a lot of different people in your full-time career. And those become the potential relationships where after you leave your company and after they go to somewhere else, then maybe at their new companies, they're like, oh, we need data visualization. I'm going to hire Julia. Or so I think that's one kind of being able to get potential clients. I've had friends do that. And I think the second part is kind of where you do a lot more external marketing. That was kind of the route that I went down, which is I made a lot of portfolio projects. I went and talked at conferences. I went and went on podcasts and tried to put my name as much out there as possible because I didn't have that implied network. That I think maybe Carla also was saying that she had. And so that's the way that I chose to do it. And the reason for it is because I also realized back when I was starting in 2016 that there wasn't as many companies, at least that I knew, that quite knew what data visualization was for. And so when I was just like cold calling or cold emailing them, it was very hard to convince them to sign a contract with me because the number one important thing for signing a contract is making sure that there's budget within that company. And if that company doesn't know what data viz is, there's no way to have a budget to sign the contract. And so I focused very much in the first like 6 or 7 months or so, very much on doing as many portfolio projects as I can and getting my name out there so that I can have inbound requests of clients coming in instead of the other way around. Yeah.
I'd like to jump in on that because my head was nodding so much up and down because I'm just going to let you all in on a little secret. And if you saw the new people there, if you want to work with a company in the marketing space, their idea of data visualization is an Excel chart, right? They do not use our language. I did a search term query around how they were looking for what I would call data visualization or information design or storytelling with data, all terms which are on my website, none of which get any hits because they are looking for infographics. That's what they call all of it. And when I started talking to people, as Shirley said, they were like, I had a director of marketing who knew me from my previous work, and she literally said to me, yeah, I don't know why I would hire you, which was eye-opening to me because I kept saying things like, you know, in the New York Times, when you see that visual of the data, oh, I love that. Yeah, that's what I'm making for you. Oh, how would I use that in my business? And that became the key question for me. How would I use that in my business? So I had to create work that I could specifically point at that solved their business problems. And I don't mean spec. I mean, here's an example of a visualization that uses similar sorts of data like your client data, your customer data, your brand awareness data. Like, where are you getting data? And there was a conversation about how can I help them get data out of their IT departments. I mean, you learn how to talk. You have to learn how to talk about what we do in language that your client, and again, as Julie was saying, in the government NGO space, you're going to talk about it very differently than probably Shirley does in the engineering tech space. I'm talking to marketers, right? They have to sell things. And so they're in my experience, and I'd love to hear other people say, but they're the farthest away from understanding how data visualization can help them sell to their customers. And I think about Nike, I think about all these brands that are doing amazing things with data that are creating fans and pulling people in. And but I have to explicitly tell those stories to clients so they even understand, like Shirley said, how to get money to hire me?
I want to jump in on this too a little bit. I think 100% in learning what the client needs are and the language is so key. Like, for instance, for in the space of the government and NGOs, a lot of the work that I do is called knowledge mobilization. Or research impact, right? Or science communication. That involves, sometimes an advanced, lesson in Excel on DataVis, or building a really crazy tool in D3, depending on, what the needs are. And again, I think there are different, because the client needs to have such an important role in this, right? Like, our clients need to disseminate tax, spending money on research that was done, and they need to get that research back out to two main segments: the stakeholders that said yes to this funding, and the public that wants to know how this money was spent. And those are not even the same audiences, and we don't actually do the same strategies around communication to those because they're so different. And I think that understanding those needs and understanding that language really, really helps in having meaningful conversations with clients, but also a huge client education piece. And I think I have this as notes and for one of the other questions, but maybe I'll just talk about it now. This idea that a lot of the work that I've been doing too is just educating them on what's even possible, because most of the time they have no idea, but it can't come from a place where it's we know better. Here's all the stuff you should employ, because if it's not sustainable within that organization, you're actually going to do more harm. Somebody coming in pushing something like D3 to a smaller NGO that doesn't have a dev team to support that is not appropriate, even though maybe that's a better tool. Or just really thinking about what how to best serve your clients is going to, I think, maintain that longevity of a relationship, which is something I have seen if you really take that into account, and who their audiences are and how to actually do that work and understand that part of it. Because I don't think it's just about producing a product. For us, it's about, okay, well, let's educate on what's possible. Let's decide what the best kind of course of action is. And I'm focusing on this because so much of that part is actually part of the project. Before you even get to developing or looking at their data or doing anything, the conversation is around what will be done and how, so that it's sustainable and meaningful to the clients that we work with. I don't know if that's because I'm in the public sector. I will defer to the other panelists to talk about this, because I don't work with corporate clients. But for us, it's such an important thing, because it is public funding ultimately, right? So kind of having that integrity around making sure it's headed the right way.
I think Karna and Julia, you both already touched on it. We've had a couple of questions about tools. So what kind of tools do you use? Do you specialize in one tool, or do you use a range of them? And how is that influenced by the kind of work that you do and the kinds of projects that you work on?
Can I go? I just want to, because I didn't get to say anything about the last one. I just want to point out, so I think everyone was talking about essentially the business of freelancing and how central that is to being a data visualization freelancer. It's really central to being any sort of freelancer. So it's something to think about, and you kind of have to build it into your strategy. I also want to just say the value of marketing, social media, and a portfolio when you have all three. I think that's probably the best way to get clients, unless you have a super deep network. Anyway, tools. So I mentioned the library NVD3, which is built on D3. I was like hardcore D3. That's the only tool worth using for a very long time. And I think I know it pretty well, so I always felt comfortable with it. But through these different jobs I took freelancing, I really realized how it's more important to choose the right tool for the job than to pick your favorite tool. So I gave a talk about it at a conference, because it was like such an insight to me. It was like I let go of that grip on this is the best thing. And basically you have to use what's right for the job. I think there are a lot of tools that are really popular, but they have a lot of limitations. And I think if you want to make something, you should learn how to make it. You should learn to use the tool that's going to let you make it. So if that means learning Illustrator or learning how to code or learning how to code better, definitely do that. I don't want to endorse one specific tool because as I said, it's like there's time and a place for each. I even tried to build my own, and I'm still kind of working on it. So that's just kind of a big, wide answer. So just, choose what you're most comfortable with.
Yeah, I want to add on to what Tyler was saying because I also come from like a very code heavy. My full-time jobs were software engineering. So then for the longest time, like Tyler said, I was like, I will do everything with code. I will do everything in my code editor, and code was my hammer for everything. And I mean, I still like in all of my projects, I still use D3. So in terms of like, I think there's I think Tyler and Carla, I think Julie, like everybody made really great points about how you should use the right tool for the client. I think Julia's point was really, I feel like it was quite eye-opening for me because of her point about if you're going to make a visualization that is supposed to be internal to a business and it's supposed to be for them to go forward and maintain themselves, it has to be with a tool that they can support. I think that's a really great point. For me, I've always kind of been like, I use D3. My clients come to me and I just use D3 with them most of the time because I tend to choose clients where it's either for journalism or even if it's not a journalism company, then I do something more closely related, more on the marketing side. So it's a one-off project. Because I found that within tech, at least the industry I'm most familiar with, most companies are not willing to kind of pay someone for 3 months to build a part of their product that then they're going to step out and not maintain. And so I've just personally found the niche for me is like within kind of more the storytelling side and the marketing, like storytelling for marketing. And that's kind of the niche I found. And that's the niche I found to really enjoy. But I think it's a really great point of like if it is something that is supposed to be for the client to maintain, to use the right tool for them. So having said that, back to my kind of story about using a code for everything and using D3 for everything. I used to, when I first started freelancing, I was doing like some personal projects. And I remember at one point, like I was pretty new to data collection. And I created a CSV file in my code editor where I literally typed in every single comma and then hit return, like typed in every single comma because in my head I was like, oh, the only way to do things is with a code editor, not because I was like pretentious or anything, but because it just didn't occur to me that there were other tools out there. And I like made JSON files in the code editor, like literally put in every open bracket and every closing bracket. And then I have a project called Data Sketches with my friend Nadi, and her background is in data science, or Nadi Brummer. And it's a project where we document our process as we make visualization projects. And I was reading her write-ups, and she was like, I used Excel to I used Excel to collect my data, maintain it, clean it, and then I was like, oh, that's right. You can export CSVs from Excel, and you don't need to be spending forever trying to make sure that every comma is in place. So yeah, that was a very big lesson learned of even just like not from like a client perspective, but I think coming from code, because code is so powerful, I think there is a place where I kind of was applying it to everything, and it was a very important lesson to learn. There's a lot of other tools out there. For the longest time, I was hand coding SVG, and then like creating shapes, hand coding, creating shapes in SVG, and I just realized for some of the more complicated shapes, I could use Illustrator. So totally agree about Tyler's point. Use the right tool for the job, either for the client or for yourself.
For sure.
I just want to jump in for a second on what Shirley said, because I think it's
Can you just keep it short? Sorry, because we do have a lot of other questions as well, so we still want to go through them all, and I think we only have 15 minutes. So
sure. Just a point I was going to make about this marriage between using one tool when you're so into it and kind of choosing to develop the skills yourself versus partnering or developing teams, because I think that's part of kind of freelancing as well, whether or not you want to be like a solo freelancer and just do everything, or whether or not you want to develop a team where maybe you will, take some interns that are designers, or you work with dev, or maybe like Shirley, you're going to, amass the skills on your own if you need to. I think that I just want to bring up that there are options for how to navigate that, with the underpinning that, yes, obviously the tool will depend on the project. But for early career people that are thinking, oh, do I need to now go and become an Illustrator expert and the computer scientist and like all of this stuff? If you want to, you can. That's totally possible. But you can also think about team management and kind of how that plays into it. I just wanted to mention that.
no, thanks. I'm sure we would spend a lot of time here answering all the questions. We just wanted to make sure to have all the range of questions asked. So another one that was quite interesting from the audience, where do you get your inspiration from, and how do you find time to learn new things and to research also on new trends of data visualization? So I don't know who wants to go for it.
I want to answer very badly, but I talked before, so if anyone wants to go, you can go first. Okay.
Okay, there's no order.
Okay. Inspiration is, I think, like, if you pay attention to the times that you get inspired about something or by something, you'll understand where it comes from. Because everyone's different. One person could look at a data set and be like, oh, like, I just got the best idea. I like go outside and like see like grass blowing in the wind, and I'm like, oh, I just got the best idea. So, it's different for everyone. But like that moment of inspiration, whatever brings you to that place, you should do as much as you can. But also, of course, looking at other people's work is always like a huge, great way to get started. There's just such great work out there, and it's so easy to find online now. And also I saw this documentary with Avicii, and he said the way he got started is he actually just ripped off other people's work for a long time until he finally developed his own style, just kind of experimenting all that. So that's another thing, is like, as you do things that other people have done, you start to see the opportunities to try something new, and you take that with you. I think once I started getting more into art over just straight data viz, it really like expanded the possibilities in my mind for working with data and taking it somewhere new. So all of those things. In terms of like finding the time to learn new skills, what I've always done, I don't know if anyone else does, is I always just found an excuse to use the new thing I wanted to learn in my work. And usually it worked out, and if it didn't, it was like, oh, well, now we know. So that's the best way. Otherwise, you just do it in your free time on the weekend or something. Just make that time and feel good that you're working on something you're really excited and care about.
I'll just jump in and say, loved everything Tyler said. Inspiration-wise, I think I do a fair mix of, I usually kind of try to be inspired all the time. And I love going to museums when we could do that. Certainly I like to look for examples of data visualization that are not coming out of the data visualization community. I find that interesting. I think, people have been visualizing information for a long time. And so whether that be history or like what kindergarten teachers are doing, it's just interesting to see how, because for me, how are people visually understanding the abstraction of the data that is done visually? And it helps me because, I can come up with some very fascinating, interesting visual metaphor for the data, but if nobody understands it, depending on the context of the work, that might be a big failure. So I'm always looking for those connections around communication and visualization. And I agree. I mean, I'll just say I've gone down many rabbit holes of trying to learn the next new thing or trying to keep up everything that I've learned over the years. And I'll tell you, like, at least half the tools that I started out with don't even exist or are used anymore. So it's always a process of learning, and everything's always getting upgraded, and someone's always inventing some new, fascinating, fantastic way to do what we do. And so I try to balance out evaluating the need of the new tool or the new approach with what is it that I actually have to do here today on this project with this particular client. And there are a number of questions about the quality of the work and our portfolio, and that is a touchstone that I think is important there's so much bad data visualization and information design out there that kind of keeping the bar on quality is one of those commitments that I've made to myself early on in my freelancing, because your clients will not do that for you. That's not their job. They expect you to be bringing great work to them. And as a freelancer, there's no one there to hold the bar for myself but me. So that's how I've been approaching that. And again, one more thing is kudos to all the people who are creating such great work today. It's so inspiring, so inspiring. And come to IO Festival. It's fantastic.
I just wanted to add 2 quick points that I'm not sure if it's within the chat, but I think one point being, I loved what Carla just said about how we as the freelancers or the consultants have the responsibility of making sure we deliver really great work. And I just want to use that to kind of touch on, I think maybe one thing that's really important that I didn't realize when I first started about freelancing is how to choose clients. And I still remember when I first started, I asked a mentor of mine, like, how should I keep myself from, being sued? Like, I'm in America, the land of suing. Like, how should I, other than setting up an LLC, like, how should I keep myself from getting sued? And he was like, turn to me. He's like, just don't work with assholes. And I thought that was like the best advice. It is to this day the best freelancing advice I've ever gotten. And I tried my best. I can usually tell within like a few emails or one phone call if they are going to be hard to work with or not. But the most important thing for me, other than having, I think I have 3 requirements: budget, scope, and timeline. And at least 2 of those have to meet kind of like a standard. But as soon as that is met, the number one thing I ask myself is, does this client respect me for my expertise in data and visualization? And can I respect this client for their expertise in their domain. So that to me is the number one way I choose a client. And that's something that it took me the years to learn. And it's not something I knew beforehand. So I wanted to add that. Sorry. And then I think the second thing I wanted to add was off of what Tyler was saying, something that you were saying kind of like triggered. And I think it's it's about finding the time. And I think I wanted to lead that into something else I wanted to just briefly touch on, which is like the money part of freelancing. Like that's hard, right? Like that's one of the biggest barriers that stop people from getting into freelancing, because the money is so irregular. Like you can't expect a check every 2 weeks. I get my check in lump sums every few months. It makes financial planning extremely difficult. I'm in Silicon Valley. I really want to move out of Silicon Valley, but I can't. And so it adds like an extra financial pressure to kind of like earn a higher amount than I necessarily want to keep up with like kind of the cost of living here. And that's like a unfortunate pressure I have to put on myself. But in terms of the money, I think it ties back into like, how do you make time? I struggled really hard last year with like, because for the longest time, I benchmarked how much I should be making via freelance with the opportunity cost of not working at a full-time job as a software engineer. Unfortunately, a full-time job as a software engineer in Silicon Valley can range between $300,000 to $500,000, depending on the company and at the expertise level that I am. But like if you go to like a big company like Google or Facebook or Netflix, that is like the highest end of what you can make in a year. It's like ridiculous. And I was benchmarking off of that year after year, and it was just making me extremely miserable. I was just like, I fell into like a little tiny bit of like depression, until I realized I needed to focus on what is not the maximum of what I can make, but rather the minimum of what is a happy amount that I can make per year that will keep me at a standard of living, that I enjoy and that I can put a little bit of savings in. That's going to be different for everybody. But I think being able to figure out that number will make the money part a lot. There will always be stress from money, but I think that will make the stress from money a little bit less. And also, having said that, that's how that ties back into how do you make time, because when I've hit that amount, or even when I haven't hit that amount and I'm like, it's okay if I'm like a little bit less, I think of it as I'm spending some money and that I'm not making money to work on projects that I find interesting, to work on, to like learn new technologies I find really interesting. So, and kind of, I think of that as like investing in myself and my skill sets, so that like after the few months, then I have more to offer potential clients. So that's how I think about it.
Thanks so much. This was really interesting, and it's also nice to see how you're all sort of nodding along to what the others are saying. So it seems like we're getting some really good advice here. We have a couple minutes left, and as a closing question, I'd just sort of like to ask each of you, if you could give a word of advice to your past self just starting out freelancing, what would that be?
I think I don't know if this is like a question that's going around, but it's kind of interesting that I had it 2 days in a row on 2 different panels. The answer that I have for both of these really is that I think that this is all about the journey and not about the outcome, at least for me, because, and this kind of ties into this idea of doing what you love and doing passionate work and this kind of thing. So the truth of the matter is that if I gave myself advice back then, to maybe do something differently, I wouldn't be here talking to all of you right now. And I love that I'm talking to all of you right now. And so from that kind of perspective, it's hard to know, because all of the weird and crazy career things and twists that have happened have, allowed me to amass this kind of broad scope of knowledge and work. So I think it's just realizing that if you base whatever you, so maybe it's just like a reassurance that the belief that if you find work that you enjoy doing day to day, and you enjoy the process, that if it ends up failing because you enjoyed it, it's not actually a failure. Whereas if you have some outcome at the end of it, maybe in 5 years you want to accomplish something or whatever, and you're just driven by that, and it doesn't come to that, then the 5 years will be perceived as a waste by you. But if it's about the day-to-day, then it's the most enjoyable thing. And if you don't even get to that outcome because you're not outcome driven, it has a different meaning to you. And I found that with things that maybe have taken more time to develop or that kind of thing, it's just that I had to just make a decision on making sure that I find value and meaning in the work that I'm doing day to day. Because all things kind of open up, at least for me, when I'm true to myself in that regard. And so maybe just realizing that even if you're just starting out, you already know the things that you like. It's probably the stuff you procrastinated with during your undergrad, right? Like whatever you were, like if you were gravitating towards other things while studying, maybe the thing that you were, like for me, I had a whole art portfolio built up while I was doing mathematics work, right? So like there's a sign already there that naturally that was seeping through what I was doing, and I listened to it. So maybe it's that. Maybe it's just being more self-aware of what you're already doing and how that fits in.
I'll just say my advice would be the more you talk about the work, the more successful you'll be. And talks that's on social or whatever, but somebody said it to me and early on, and I thought they were ridiculous, but really it's about relationships. If you want to be a freelancer, if you want your own business, it's about relationships. The relationships are about your work, but talk to people.
I would tell myself, you can't change fate. Don't try it. No, I think actually what Julie said was really great. For me, like working freelance, I really wanted to do the creative artistic stuff, and I never quite got there. And I should say the reason I stopped being working freelance full time is my wife and I had a baby, and I had a few moments like while I was freelancing where like, oh, my client, like they canceled or they hired someone internally, whatever. So those are really terrifying moments when like it just ends and you're like, well, that was like my paycheck. So I just didn't want to have that concern. But to me, like that was always the priority, is like, I want to have I want to be happy with what I'm doing every day and where I am. So I don't know. I'm sure someday I'll be freelancing again. So I guess this is a good question to think about now, because in the future, looking at. But that's all I got.
Yeah, I just want to say congratulations to Tyler on his baby.
Thank you.
Really exciting. But I really agree with what everybody has said. And I think to Julia's point, I think when I saw this question, I really struggled trying to figure out what I would say. And I still struggle with what I would say, because I feel like giving advice to my past self, to me, almost implies that my past self did something so tremendously wrong that I regret it and I don't want it to happen again. And I feel like all of the twists and turns I took to get here, while inefficient, I really appreciate, because those lessons are stuck with me so much more. So kind of the things that I said before about like the money and the clients and building relationships, I've made a lot of my mistakes. I don't think I was as good with some clients versus others. But those are all extremely valuable lessons that I've learned that I don't want to change anything for. So I guess it would just be, just enjoy your time. Don't stress about money so much. Just don't.
but like don't like be irresponsible with the money. But like I think like I have plenty. Just remember, I have plenty in savings. Don't stress about money so much. Yeah.
Thank you. So yeah, thanks to all four of you. This was really great. Yeah, we didn't get to all of the questions, but we can share them on Slack afterwards. So if any of you still feel like answering some questions, they're going to be in the Early Career channel. And that's it. Thank you.